Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again it is Sunday, and that means it's time for the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week, a weekly vlog that I put out where I ask you as my viewers and subscribers about something that deals with guns, firearms, gun culture, history, news, politics, or current events that I want to get your thoughts and opinions on. This week's question deals with calibers, and more specifically new calibers that are coming on the market. And are you going to adopt one? Do they interest you? Well, let's talk about this, but let's first read this week's question. While new calibers are nothing new, in the past year we have seen a few new ones introduced that are supposed to revolutionize the firearms world. Amongst these are .30 Super Carry and .277 Fury. Like all new calibers, these claim to improve upon the roles of standardized calibers but address some of their shortcomings. In your opinion, will any of these new calibers, whatever they are, ever get the marketplace traction to replace the standardized and universal ones we all know and use? So every year, especially when SHOT Show comes out, you have all of these different ammunition companies that are coming out with new calibers. The ones that always come to mind are Nosler. I always hear about the new ones, the 24 Nosler or the 30 Nosler. I don't even know the numbers because they come out with new ones every single year. And these are designed supposedly to help hunters or different types of shooting disciplines accomplish very specific tasks. But yet, when I go to the gun store and I look at the rifles on the shelf, I pretty much see 308 and 30-06 and 5.56 and the usual suspects. I don't really see these new calibers. Now, I'm not saying you can't go on to specialty sites or maybe auction sites and buy these particular rifles or handguns chambered in these new calibers, but you're really hard-pressed to see any on the store shelves. And why is that? Well, I think it has to do with a number of reasons. I mean, you have to look at inventory management. If you own a gun store and you're going to stock and spend money, you have to go, well, am I going to be able to sell what I'm buying? Well, if I buy 100 pistols chambered and 30 Super Carry, well, am I going to sell them all? Are people even going to know what that is? Am I going to be able to get enough ammunition that if somebody buys this new pistol, they're going to be able to stock up on it? Well, we already have the infrastructure for 9mm, and I know that most common people know what 9mm is. Maybe I should go with that one instead, and it seems to be relatively effective. You know, I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir here, and I know as a gun guy, I am always interested in all of the new innovative things that are happening in the firearms world. So yes, some of it intrigues me. I like to learn about this stuff as much as I can, but on the other hand, I'm like, man, we just have the infrastructure for 45, 9, 5.56, 308, the usual calibers. And the further you go away and deviate from those usual calibers, things typically get a little bit harder to get and more expensive. And a lot of times these specialty calibers kind of lay in the realm of reloaders, people that have the ability to reload their own ammunition so they don't have to worry about going to the store and picking up a box of some rare caliber or some new caliber. Now, does that mean that the future of calibers is set? Well, absolutely not. But I really think that when it comes to the juggernaut that is the standardized calibers, it's something that any new caliber is going to be hard-pressed to beat. I also like to look at it from the perspective of modern technology. I think in some ways in the past 100 years, we made huge advances in everything from firearms to aviation, and I'm going to use aviation as an example. But once you reach a certain platform, all you can really do is improve that platform. And unless there's some major change in the development of that technology, well, you just kind of improve upon what you already have. And I think a great example of this is the B-52 Stratofortress, the United States long-range strategic bomber. This airplane has been in service for over 70 years, and they're about to refit the engines, and some of these airframes are going to go over 100 years. That is absolutely amazing. And you would think that with all the advancements that have gone on over the past 100 years in aviation, well, replacing the B-52s would be something that would be easy, manageable, cost-effective, and just make plain sense. But it actually doesn't. Why? Because this 70-year-old plane does the job better than just about any other plane in existence, and anything that we need to do specialty with it can be modified onto that platform. So why go out and invest all of this time and money in a new platform when the one we have currently works, can still be upgraded and modified for a lot less of the cost? So I kind of look at calibers the same way. You know, what is the difference between 9mm and 45? Well, there is a big difference. You have the caliber 45, and 9mm is about 35 caliber. Actually, I think it's .355 to be exact. So you have that distance between those calibers, and if you want something maybe in between, you got 40. But then after you have all of these different calibers in existence, you're like, well, what's the point of having another 30 caliber cartridge or a .35 caliber cartridge? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, you can change the ballistics of it by adding more powder. Well, we can already take those calibers and make them +P or +P+. Or we can change the dimensions of the projectiles to make them more effective, maybe going through barriers or going through armor. We already have the calibers that we need. So in my opinion, and the way that I typically look at this, that unless there's some huge advancement in ballistics, especially when it comes to propellants, maybe caseless ammunition, I think that we have pretty much figured out the most effective cartridges in existence, and all we can really do is modify them. But I know I'm kind of giving away what I think when it comes to this poll. But with all of that said, let's see what you guys had to say with this week's results. With over 1,000 votes this week, we have yes, ammunition is always improving and we will adopt the new ones, 22%. Kind of, like 357 SIG, it will be used by a few, but not widely, 55%. No, don't fix it if it's not broken. We know what works, 22%. And something else, explained in the comments, 1%. Wow, so the results of this poll are actually pretty even. And the majority of people are like, yeah, they're going to exist. Some people are going to adopt them and use them. And then we almost have an even split between the people that say yes and the people that say no. But let's go through each one of these and I'll give you guys my personal opinions. We have yes, ammunition is always improving and we will adopt the new ones. Well, we've had new calibers come out in the past 30, 40, 50 years. We have 40 Smith & Wesson, 357 SIG. Now we have 30 Super Carry, and I'm sure there's other calibers that I'm not even mentioning or am thinking about right now. But right now, where is 40 Smith & Wesson? Well, there are a lot of guns in 40, but let's just be honest, the majority of them are in 9 and 45, and some people even say that 40 is a dying caliber. So back in the 1990s when this caliber came out, it was the huge new thing. It was going to give you the capacity of a 9 and the power of a 45 all into one. And then we realized that every caliber is a compromise. Well, when you have 9mm, you get a lot of capacity, but you don't get that knockdown power that 45 has. But then when you have 45, you lose a lot when it comes to capacity, and you have to have frames of handguns that are a lot bigger. So 40 was supposed to be that intermediate between the two. And then everyone realized in order to make this work, you have to have the pressures a lot higher. And then there was problems with the guns wearing out. And yes, there are guns that are designed around the 40, like the HK USP, that don't wear out in little round counts. However, it was still a compromise, and a lot of people look at the 9 and 45 and say, well, I like one or the other. I don't need the compromise in between the two. And so where are we at now? Well, we're back to 45, which was introduced in 1905, and we're back to 9mm, which I think was introduced in 1902 or 1903. So it's the same thing. We introduce something, maybe some people are really interested in it, and then we kind of go back to the old ones. And when I was talking about projectiles and ballistics, everyone says, well, there's no need to go to 40 anymore because the technology that goes into projectiles has come so far that we get 9mm projectiles that are just as good as 40 are. Well, why can't we just continue to adapt the current cartridges that we have? We have the infrastructure, we have the loading tools, we have government agencies and militaries that are already using these calibers, so all we have to do is just modify the technology that goes into the projectiles or the propellant, but everything else stays the same. And I think from an economic standpoint, that just makes the most sense. Then we have, kind of like 357 SIG, it will be used by a few but not widely, and this got the majority of votes, and it's probably the one that I would vote for, because I have to tell you, 357 SIG might be my favorite handgun caliber. It really is. It's so neat. It's a bottleneck cartridge, so it feeds more reliably. Essentially, it's a 9mm projectile. I think it is .355 as well as 9mm. It's not really 357 like the revolver cartridge, and you get close to the same ballistics as a 357 Magnum. It is a really cool cartridge, but it's also really expensive, and I understand why some people don't like it. It's snappy like a 40, and it's really loud, so why not just go to 9mm or 9mm plus P? I totally get that argument. I think it is a really cool round, but I know it's not going to take off as much as I wish it would, and even though I think it's a great cartridge. But that doesn't mean the cartridge isn't here to stay. I know there's a few law enforcement agencies like the Secret Service that use that cartridge. I believe for a while the Texas Rangers used that particular cartridge, and I like to use it. So it's not going to go away, but it's not going to be predominant. And I also think that for certain applications, many of these new calibers, especially the ones in the rifle calibers that are designed for military applications or hunting applications, will always have their niche. And that's just the way it's going to be. But the infrastructure around 9 and 45 and 5.56, I think it's just here to stay. Then we have no, don't fix it. If it's not broken, we know what works. And to be honest with you, I thought this one was going to get a lot more votes, simply because we're all kind of set in our ways. We already have safes full of these guns chambered in these common calibers. I don't want to go out and buy a whole nother set of Glock pistols in 30 super carry or whatever, because that's the hot new thing. No, I'm done with that. 9mm works perfectly fine. I don't understand that in a self-defense scenario, which typically is going to use 3 shots at 7 feet and less, well, is super carry going to be that much different than 9mm for my application? Probably not. And we know that 9mm works. So I don't understand why some people think that we need to fix what's not broken. I'm all about the innovation, but as I said, personally, I kind of feel like unless there's a change in propellant, unless there's a change in ballistic technology, I kind of feel like it's not really needed. What problem does 30 super carry fix that we don't have already in other calibers like 380 or 9mm? But that's just my personal opinion. And then we have something else explained in the comments. And so that's kind of how I think and feel about all of this. I welcome the new calibers. My mind is always open, and I do not reject a new caliber just because it's new. I will absolutely give 30 super carry a chance. I will absolutely give 277 Fury, which I think they said is 6.5 or 6.8 by 51. I haven't learned all of the new numbers yet. And if the military adopts it, I'm sure more rifles will be chambered in it. And I will definitely give it a chance. My mind is not closed to something just because it's new. My mind just wants to have what is practical. And I have to look at the numbers and go, really, does 30 super carry do anything that 9mm doesn't? Well, I don't really think it does. And I already have the infrastructure and the guns chambered in 9. I don't need one in 30 super carry. But I'm all for 30 super carry being a thing. So that's my thoughts. So I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say with this week's top rated comment. So with the top rated comment of the week, we have Tanicus Legion 78, who says 38 Super, 357 SIG, 45 Gap, 40 S&W. There are those calibers who came out with great fanfare. They will find an audience, but the stranglehold of 9mm and the tradition of 45 ACP and the Rebel 10mm and old school 38 357 Magnum have too much power in the market, especially for reloaders. And I agree. I actually think the biggest market force is the average gun person that may only own 1 or 2 guns. As I said, when it comes to gun store inventory, they know they're buying guns to sell to people that may only own 1. And they're going to come in and go, well, what's the best gun for me? And if you say, hey, you need this new 30 Super Carry, they're like, what the heck is that? Well, I know what a 9mm is. I've heard of those. I see those in movies and television. I want to get that. Well, that's going to be the biggest market driving force. And yes, the reloaders probably, arguably, are the second most important. And that's why some of these legacy calibers are absolutely here to stay. Then we have Web Security, who says, I have a question similar to this. With the Army adopting 6.8mm rifles, do you think that eventually replaces 5.56 223 in the wider marketplace with police, agencies, and ultimately civilians? The answer is yes. As I said, my mind is open to this. But is this going to be an overnight shift? Well, probably not. And when it comes to decisions that are made by police and military, we know how long it took them to replace the Beretta M9. They kept having trials and trials and trials. They would select something, there'd be a lawsuit, then they'd go back to have more trials, and then we had to deal with our NATO allies. Part of the whole idea about NATO is that we've standardized things like calibers. That means we have to get every other nation, essentially, in our NATO bloc to agree to change calibers. Now, I know not every country has to do it, but that's kind of the way it is. And other countries are going to look at their budgets and go, well, we've already invested millions and millions in rifles and handguns chambered in these calibers. I don't really want to replace it because it works. And so you're going to have a lot of resistance to that. And I think the marketplace and economics plays a huge role in the effectiveness of these calibers in the marketplace. So then we have Joe Sapienza, who says, once the military adopts 6.8 by 51 or 277 Fury, which they will, it will become just as common and prevalent as the 5.56 over time. Remember, the 5.56 made that same evolution. The 223 Remington was a mainstay when the 5.56 was adopted, which wasn't even a thing. Yeah, but it was darn close. The difference between 5.56 and 223, while you can't shoot 5.56 in a 223, you can shoot 223 in a 5.56. When it comes to the adoption of this new caliber, there's no reverse compatibility with 5.56. It's a whole new platform with all new parts, and I think that's going to be the big rub for a lot of people. Now, of course, if the military officially adopts it and every M4 carbine goes to this new caliber, well, you're going to have a lot of civilians wanting to have the latest and greatest, and that caliber definitely will take off. But for me, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Now, even the Remington 223 is not the original. It was developed from the Remington 222. So it's always evolving, but those evolutionary steps are small. That's the whole thing about evolution. It's one little step at a time. You don't go from 22 long rifle to 50 BMG like that. It's a slow evolution. Then we have the reindeer, the rabbit, the bat, who says, I think we'll see some particular niche demographics run with some of these newer cartridges for a little while at least. I believe the market of enthusiasts for shooting sports and proactive home self-defenders is now large enough to support some of these new kids on the block. Add to that the alarming post-pandemic rate at which folks are attempting to stock up on any sort of ammo they can find, and yeah, if it's one on the shelves, then people will buy it. Well, I do agree, but that also brings up a great point. Well, we go through these ammo crunches every couple of years. Whenever a big event happens in the news or maybe politics changes here in the United States, everyone has to run out and buy everything. And let's say you have this new kid on the block caliber. 30 Super Carry is a good example. And you're like, well, I better go stock up on some of this ammo. Well, the ammo companies are like, we're running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and everybody buys every 9mm bullet we can possibly make. We don't have time for 30 Super Carry. So you're going to be hard pressed to find that ammunition, where maybe if you have a 9 or 45, you'll be better off. And even if you're paying a lot of money for it, you'll still be able to find it. I don't know if in the ammo crunch you can find these boutique calibers. It's just going to be really hard. So he brings up a fantastic point. And then finally we have Mike M, who says, with gas prices and cost of living currently, I'm just shooting what I got. I still trust my Glock 26 Gen 3, so I don't see a need to replace it at the moment. I think a lot of average shooters probably feel the same. I do like the innovation though. And another comment that I completely agree. I'm all about the innovation. I welcome the innovation because you never know. One of these little steps in the evolution of ballistics is going to be the next big thing, and we don't even know it at the moment when it happens. So I welcome it. But the biggest influencer, I think, with any of these calibers is the average civilian. What are the majority of people buying? Because that's what the gun stores are going to stock up on. And then if you go up the chain, if the gun stores are not buying 30 Super Carry or some type of new caliber, and by the way, I know I've said 30 Super Carry in this video a whole bunch. I'm not picking on that particular cartridge. It's just the hot new thing right now. Well, if the gun stores aren't buying them, well, the distributors aren't going to carry them. And if the distributors aren't carrying them, the manufacturers aren't going to make them. And so it's just a ripple effect, and that's just the way that it is. So that is the Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week. It has my thoughts and your thoughts. I don't think we're going to come to any resolution today, but it is great to put our finger on the pulse of our fellow gun owners to figure out where does everybody stand? Because when it comes to the momentum of these new calibers and the adoption of these new calibers, I think it's kind of a groupthink thing. It's not like one person or one organization can necessarily adopt it, and then it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. As I was saying earlier in the video, we'll look at 40 Smith & Wesson and look what happened to it and where it is today. It's still a viable cartridge. They still make guns for it, but it's nowhere as popular as it was 25 years ago. So there you go, the Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say in the comment section below. So, as always, thanks for watching.